Beneath the calm surface of the sea lies a forgotten map of global trade. For thousands of years, harbors were the vital centers of civilization, where ships exchanged everything from spices to ideas, connecting entire continents. But many of these powerful ports met a sudden and catastrophic end, vanishing completely beneath the waves. By the end of this journey, you will know the stories of 20 of these lost harbor complexes and the forces that claimed them. How does an entire city simply disappear from the coast, and what can its silent ruins tell us about our own world today? The answers lie in an archaeological search spanning the globe, from a legendary Egyptian gateway to a medieval town erased by storms. What do you believe is the greatest force that shapes the fate of our coastal cities? The scale of this loss is almost beyond comprehension. We are not talking about a few forgotten docks or a single submerged pier. Entire cities with their bustling market squares, towering lighthouses, and miles of waterfront warehouses have been swallowed by the sea. These were not places that faded slowly into obscurity. Their ends were often sudden, violent, and total, transforming thriving centers of global exchange into silent, watery graves. This creates a unique kind of historical time capsule. While a city abandoned on land is slowly dismantled by wind and weather, a port submerged intact is sealed in a moment, preserved by the very element that destroyed it. The mud and sand settle over streets and buildings, locking away artifacts, shipwrecks, and even the footprints of the last people to walk there. So what forces are powerful enough to erase a harbor complex from the map? The causes are as varied as the ports themselves, but they generally fall into three colossal categories. First, the earth itself can betray a city. Tectonic subsidence occurs when the geological plate a city is built upon slowly sinks, often due to the immense weight of the structures above it or shifting faults deep below. The land literally drops and the sea pours in to claim the new space. Second, the global climate writes its own history. Eustatic sea level rise describes the worldwide increase in ocean volume, most dramatically as massive ice sheets melted at the end of the last ice age. Coastlines retreated, and what was once dry land became continental shelf. The third force is perhaps the most ironic. Many great harbors were ultimately killed by their own success. The process of siltation happens when a port's constant activity, the dredging of channels, the erosion from upstream farming, the dumping of waste fills the very basin that ships need to navigate. The harbor becomes a swamp, then a meadow, and finally a memory. For centuries, these sunken worlds were nothing but legend, whispered about in sailors' tales. Today, a new field of science is turning legend into fact. Maritime archaeologists, armed with technology their predecessors could only dream of, are the explorers of this last frontier. Side-scan sonar paints detailed pictures of the seafloor without disturbing a single grain of sand. Submersible drones glide through darkened water, their lights revealing columns and cobblestones where fish now swim. Each scan, each dive, pulls back the curtain on a lost chapter of human ambition. What we are about to explore are 20 specific stories of rise and catastrophic fall. Each sunken port is a puzzle piece, and when we fit them together, they form a startling picture of our own vulnerability and the enduring, powerful relationship between humanity and the sea. 2,000 years of silence ended in the waters of Abu Bay. In the year 2000, a team led by underwater archaeologist Frank Gaudio was conducting a routine survey off the coast of Egypt when their sonar screens revealed something impossible. Emerging from the dark silt were the outlines of a lost world. This was not a shipwreck or a scattered collection of ruins. It was an entire city, frozen in time beneath the Mediterranean. They had found Thonis-Heracleion, a place that had crossed the line from history into myth. For centuries, scholars had debated its existence, knowing it only from ancient texts and a few scattered inscriptions. Now here it was, a legendary harbor complex that once controlled the very lifeblood of an empire. The city held a fascinating dual identity. To the ancient Egyptians, it was Thonis, a name echoing through temple records. To the Greek merchants and sailors who arrived from across the sea, it was Heracleion, named for the hero Heracles. This was not merely a busy port, it was the mandatory gateway. Every single ship entering Egypt from the Mediterranean was required to stop here first. It was a customs house, a religious center, and a bustling international hub all in one. Imagine the scene on its crowded quays. Egyptian officials inspected cargoes of gold and grain, while Greek merchants negotiated for prized papyrus and linen. The air would have been thick with the smells of incense, spices, and saltwater. Towering over this human activity were monuments to divine and royal power. Grand temples dedicated to the god Amun-Jereb stood as statements of Egyptian sovereignty. Among the most stunning discoveries were colossal statues of a pharaoh, each standing over 16 feet tall, and a majestic stone representation of the god Hapi, who symbolized the Nile's fertility. These giants once lined the city's main canal, a silent, imposing welcome for every visitor. Yet this mighty gateway was built on a foundation of profound vulnerability. The entire city was constructed on the unstable clay of the Nile Delta. Over centuries, this soft ground began to fail. Researchers believe a perfect storm of disasters sealed the city's fate, likely around the 8th century after the Common Era. First, the constant weight of its massive stone buildings caused the waterlogged clay to liquefy during seismic activity, a process where solid ground temporarily behaves like a liquid. Then, a major earthquake may have triggered a tsunami that delivered a catastrophic blow. Finally, the land simply subsided, sinking beneath a combination of rising sea levels and its own collapsing foundation. The sea did not just flood Thonis-Heracleion, it consumed it entirely. What makes this loss so poignant is the sheer volume of life that the silt preserved. Archaeologists have recovered a breathtaking catalogue of everyday existence and sacred ritual. There are delicate gold coins, bronze ceremonial vessels, and stone tablets inscribed in both Egyptian hieroglyphs and ancient Greek. They found the remains of more than 60 ships, from simple river barges to seagoing vessels, still tied to the stone piers as if waiting for a voyage that never came. Most haunting of all is a ceremonial barge, likely used in sacred processions for the god Osiris, discovered in a canal near a temple. These objects are not just artifacts, they are tangible memories. They connect us directly to the clerks, priests, sailors, and merchants who walked those now sunken streets. The story of Thonis-Heracleion is a powerful lesson in humility. It shows that no matter how grand our constructions, how vital our trade networks, or how deep our cultural influence, we remain at the mercy of the natural world. The very environment that gave the city its life, the fertile delta, the strategic coastline, ultimately reclaimed it. This first lost harbor sets the stage for our entire exploration, proving that the sea's archives hold not just shipwrecks, but entire chapters of human civilization. The silent, sunken streets of Pavlopetri are a map to a world before history. Off the coast of southern Laconia in Greece, where the water is a clear, brilliant blue, the oldest known submerged city on Earth rests just a few meters below the surface. Unlike the grand stone monuments of Thonis-Heracleion, Pavlopetri whispers of a much older, more foundational chapter in human society. Founded over 5,000 years ago during the Bronze Age, this was a functioning city centuries before the construction of the Egyptian pyramids or the rise of classical Greece. Its discovery fundamentally changed our understanding of prehistoric complexity. here preserved in the sandy seabed, is not a collection of random ruins but a nearly complete urban plan. Archaeologists have mapped a clear grid of streets, the foundations of distinct buildings, central courtyards, and even chamber tombs, outlining a sophisticated community that understood order and public space. This layout reveals a society that was not merely surviving, but thriving with intention. Pavlopetri was almost certainly a vital hub within the vast trade network of the Minoan civilization, the advanced maritime culture based on Crete. Its economy was built on the sea. The city's location on a sheltered bay made it a perfect port for ships traveling along the Peloponnese. Researchers believe it was a specialized center, likely processing and exporting two highly valued goods, textiles and pottery. Large ceramic vats found on site suggest dyeing operations for wool or linen, producing vibrant fabrics sought across the Mediterranean. The distinctive pottery styles discovered there, which match those from Crete and other Aegean islands, tell a story of constant exchange. This was not an isolated village. It was a cosmopolitan node where Minoan merchants interacted with local populations, exchanging goods, technologies, and ideas. The city's prosperity, however, was built upon a geological fault line in every sense. The submergence of Pavlopetri is a story written by the restless earth. The city sits near the Hellenic Arc, one of the most seismically active zones in Europe. The prevailing theory suggests its end did not come from a slow rise of waters, but from a sudden, violent collapse. A series of powerful earthquakes, likely occurring around 1,000 years before the Common Era, struck the region. The ground beneath Pavlopetri literally dropped in an event known as co-seismic subsidence. The land shifted downward several meters in a matter of minutes, and the sea rushed in to claim it. There was no time for a gradual evacuation or adaptation. The city was simply taken. This catastrophic event, while tragic for its inhabitants, created an archaeological miracle. Because the city was fully submerged and never rebuilt upon, it remained in a state of pristine preservation. Later civilizations built their ports elsewhere, leaving Pavlopetri's blueprint untouched beneath the waves. It is a perfect time capsule, offering an unparalleled snapshot of prehistoric maritime life, from the layout of a Bronze Age home to the anchoring techniques used for ships. This second lost harbor invites a profound reflection on fragility and resilience. Pavlopetri flourished for millennia, developing a complex society deeply connected to the sea. Yet its existence was always conditional, balanced on the edge of a tectonic plate. Its story reminds us that for countless coastal communities throughout history, and indeed for many today, the very source of their wealth and connection, the dynamic coastline, is also the source of their greatest peril. The silent, sunken grid of its streets is more than a ruin. It is a permanent question etched into the seabed. How do we build our world knowing the ground itself can change in an instant? The transition from prehistoric grids to imperial ambition is written in stone and silt at the mouth of the Tiber River. While Rome commanded an empire, its greatest city suffered from a critical vulnerability, a terrible harbor. The original port of Ostia, situated on the river itself, was too small and prone to silting, leaving massive grain ships from Egypt and Africa vulnerable to shipwreck on the open coast. The hunger of 1 million Romans demanded a better solution. Emperor Claudius in the 1st century undertook one of the ancient world's most audacious engineering projects. He ordered the construction of an entirely new artificial harbor complex a few miles north of Ostia, boldly named Portus, which simply means the harbor. This was not an adaptation of nature, but a declaration of mastery over it. Engineers cut a massive basin directly into the coastline, protected by 2 curving seawalls and a monumental lighthouse that guided ships safely inland. The scale was staggering. The Roman historian Suetonius noted that to stabilize the foundation in the soft ground, builders deliberately sank the giant obelisk ship that had once brought an Egyptian monument to Rome, filling it with concrete and using it as part of the breakwater. It was a symbol of imperial power so vast, it used other symbols as mere construction material. Yet this first basin proved vulnerable to fierce southwestern winds and relentless silting. Half a century later, Emperor Trajan perfected the design. He added a magnificent inner harbor, a perfect hexagon covering over 80 acres, connected to Claudius's basin and the Tiber by a network of canals. This geometric marvel was not just for show, it was a masterpiece of logistics. Around its edges stood immense multi-story warehouses called horia, where grain, olive oil, Spanish metals, and Egyptian papyrus were stored and distributed. For centuries, Portus was the literal lifeline of Rome, a humming machine of bureaucracy and trade where the riches of the known world were funneled directly to the empire's heart. Its decline was the slow, quiet opposite of its dramatic birth. There was no single earthquake or tsunami. Instead, the harbor fell victim to the very process it was built to defeat, siltation, and to the unraveling of the system it served. The complex network of canals required constant, expensive dredging by a centralized imperial authority. As the Western Roman Empire fragmented, that maintenance faded. The channels clogged, the great hexagonal basin grew shallow, and the vital flow of goods slowed to a trickle. By the early medieval period, Portus was largely abandoned, its basins transforming into malarial swamps and then fertile farmland, its precise geometry buried under meters of earth. This slow death by silt, however, created an archaeological gift. The same mud that choked the harbor sealed and preserved its outlines with remarkable clarity. Today, using ground-penetrating radar and excavation, archaeologists can trace the entire sprawling complex, from the grand hexagon down to the footprints of individual warehouses. They study the concrete hydraulic cement, a Roman invention that hardens underwater, and the ingenious sluice gates designed to manage water flow. Portus stands as a dual testament to the breathtaking scale of Roman engineering ambition and to nature's patient, inevitable reclamation. It shows that a harbor can die not with a cataclysm but with a sigh when the human will to maintain it finally fades away. The line between myth and history dissolves in the warm waters off Gujarat. For over 2,000 years, the story of Dwarka existed in the realm of sacred narrative, detailed in ancient Sanskrit texts like the Mahabharata. It was described as a magnificent fortified island city, the glorious kingdom founded by the deity Krishna, a place of immense wealth and splendor built upon reclaimed land from the sea. Its end was just as epic, said to have been swallowed by the ocean after Krishna's departure from the world. This was long considered a powerful metaphor, a spiritual allegory. Then, in the late 20th century, marine archaeologists began to find something astonishing beneath the waves. Scattered across the seabed near the modern town of Dwarka, they uncovered large, geometric stone structures, some appearing to be parts of fortification walls or foundations. They found stone anchors of a type used by ancient mariners and a wealth of pottery sherds whose styles date back thousands of years. These were not random artifacts, they were the footprints of a substantial, sophisticated, and ancient port complex. The discovery ignited a profound debate that continues to this day. Are these sunken ruins the physical remains of the legendary Dwarka from the epic traditions, or are they evidence of a major, yet previously unknown, port city from the Indus Valley or Harappan civilization? The archaeological evidence points to a settlement that thrived during a period of extensive maritime trade, a hub that would have connected the Indian subcontinent to Mesopotamia and beyond. Its submergence, however, was not the result of a sudden divine event, but a slow, inexorable force of nature. Scientists attribute the flooding of this coastline to the global rise in sea levels that occurred at the end of the last ice age, a process that unfolded over centuries. As the waters gradually advanced, they would have reclaimed settlements inch by inch, generation by generation. This slow-motion catastrophe may have been so deeply traumatic, so fundamental to the cultural memory of the people who lived there, that it was later woven into their most sacred stories as a singular, cataclysmic moment. The lost harbor of Dwarka, therefore, exists in two powerful dimensions. It is a tangible archaeological site offering clues about ancient Indian maritime prowess, and it is a permanent fixture in the spiritual consciousness of millions. It shows how a sunken city does not merely vanish, it can transform, living on in myth long after its stones have been claimed by the sea. This blending of geological fact and cultural memory challenges us to listen more carefully to the oldest stories we tell, for they may hold echoes of real landscapes lost beneath the waves. 8,000 years of stillness rests just offshore. The discovery of Atlet Yam off the coast of Israel did more than add another site to the map. It shattered the timeline of human history. Found by marine archaeologist Ehud Galilee in the 1980s, this is not a harbor of grand empires, but of a small, resilient Neolithic community from a time before pottery, before writing, before the wheel. What they built here, however, reveals a sophistication we never knew existed. This village, dating to over 8,000 years ago, is the oldest known submerged settlement in the world with clear harbor structures. Its inhabitants were not merely living by the sea, they were engineering it. At the heart of the settlement, archaeologists found a stone-built well, lined with carefully placed stones reaching down to a freshwater source. This was a permanent, intentional anchor to the coastline, a declaration that this community was here to stay. Nearby, a mysterious semicircle of massive stones, or megaliths, stands in the shallow water, possibly a ritual site where ceremonies connected the people to the forces of the sea and sky. The evidence of their life is etched into the seabed. The bones of deep-water fish like tuna and the remains of domesticated cattle and pigs speak of a dual economy, harvesting the bounty of the Mediterranean while farming the land. This was a fully realized coastal society, a prototype for every harbor town that would follow. Its end was a slow, relentless pressure. The primary force was the global rise in sea levels as the last great ice sheets continued to melt, a process that would have crept forward year after year, encroaching on freshwater sources and farmland. Researchers also found evidence of a sudden, violent layer, a deposit of sand and marine shells thrust deep into the settlement. This suggests a final, catastrophic blow may have come from a tsunami, potentially triggered by a colossal landslide from the Mount Etna volcano far away in Sicily. Whether it was the gradual encroachment or a single devastating wave, the community of Atlet Yam was ultimately forced to abandon their homes to the water. Their silent village now offers a humbling correction to our historical narrative. It proves that the human impulse to build a life connected to the sea, to create a defined harbor space, is not a product of advanced civilization, but a foundational chapter of our species. These people understood the sea's rhythms and resources millennia before the pyramids were conceived. Their loss, sealed by the dual forces of climatic change and geological chance, reminds us that the story of sunken harbors is not just about fallen empires, but about the first communities who ever looked to the horizon and decided to build their world at the water's edge. A ghost town whispers from beneath the mudflats of the North Sea. For centuries, sailors in the Wadden Sea spoke of Rungholt, a fabulously wealthy trading port that vanished in a single night, drowned for its pride and sin. They called it the Northern Atlantis, a legend born from the terrifying power of the sea. But this was no myth. Rungholt was very real, a thriving member of the Frisian people who built their lives and fortunes on land wrestled from the ocean itself. These were not passive settlers, they were landscape engineers, Using intricate systems of dikes and drainage canals, they reclaimed fertile marshland from the tidal flats, creating rich pastures and a network of trading settlements. Rungholt grew prosperous from this reclaimed earth, its wealth built on cattle, wool, and the trade that flowed through its canals. It was a testament to human ingenuity, a bustling harbor complex built on what was once the seabed. This very success, however, placed a target on the city. The land was soft, low, and perpetually thirsty, requiring constant, vigilant maintenance of the protective dikes. Then, in January of the year 1362, nature delivered an unimaginable invoice. A colossal storm, known as the Grote Mandrenk or Great Drowning of Men, surged down from the North Atlantic. Hurricane-force winds drove a wall of water over the sea defenses. The dikes, perhaps already weakened by neglect or the sheer scale of the surge, shattered. The sea reclaimed in hours what had taken generations to build. Rungholt and dozens of neighboring villages were simply erased, swallowed by the tidal waves. The loss of life was catastrophic, with estimates suggesting tens of thousands perished along the coasts of the Netherlands, Germany, and Denmark. In the aftermath, the story of Rungholt's hubris flourished. Folklore said the townspeople, in their arrogance, had mocked the church and a visiting beggar, and the storm was divine punishment. This narrative gave a moral framework to an otherwise senseless tragedy, transforming a natural disaster into a powerful parable about the dangers of pride and the folly of challenging greater forces. For hundreds of years, that was all that remained, a cautionary tale. Then the sea began to give up its secrets. On exceptionally low tides, the receding waters of the Wadden Sea exposed the faint, ghostly outlines of the past. Researchers have mapped the contours of Rungholt's main drainage canal, over 100 meters wide, and the raised settlement mounds where houses once stood. They find the remains of wooden wells, the rings that once drew fresh water from the salty earth, and scattered brick and pottery. These are not the grand stone monuments of Mediterranean ports, but the humble, poignant foundations of a community that lived by its wits on the edge of the world. The story of Rungholt is a dual legacy. It is a stark historical lesson about the vulnerability of human settlements in marginal, engineered landscapes, especially in an era of climatic volatility. But it is equally a testament to the human mind's need to make meaning from chaos. When the physical city vanished, it was reborn as folklore, a permanent warning etched not in stone but in story, reminding every generation that the sea giveth, and the sea most definitively taketh away. The legend of Rungholt shows a harbour erased by water, but another great port was lost to something far more mundane, Earth itself. In the heart of modern Istanbul, a routine construction project cracked open a time capsule from the Age of Emperors. Workers digging the Yenikapi subway station in 2004 expected to find soil and rock, not wood and history. Their machinery struck something strange, and archaeologists were called in. What they uncovered was nothing short of staggering: the lost Byzantine harbour of Theodosius, buried for over 1,000 years. This was not a few scattered ruins. It was the main commercial port of Constantinople, the legendary capital of the Eastern Roman Empire. From the 4th century onward, this harbour was the final maritime destination for the Silk Road, where spices from India, silk from China, and grain from Egypt were unloaded for the imperial city. The excavation revealed a vast, rectangular basin, its stone wharves and wooden piers preserved in the wet clay. But the true marvel was the fleet sleeping in the mud, 37 complete shipwrecks, the largest collection of medieval vessels ever discovered in one place. The preservation was breathtaking. There were broad-beamed round ships, the cargo trucks of their day, their holds still containing amphorae that once held wine and oil. Sleeker galleys, likely used for patrol or rapid transport, rested beside humble fishing boats. The wood, from keel to decking, was intact, offering a literal blueprint for a lost era of shipbuilding. This harbor did not vanish in a storm or an earthquake. Its end was a slow, deliberate suffocation. The Lycus River, which emptied into the harbor, carried a constant stream of silt from the hills above the city. Over centuries, this sediment accumulated, gradually filling the basin and making it unusable for deep draft ships. By the 11th century, the great port was essentially a swamp. The city, ever pragmatic, did not fight this change, it simply built over it. The old coastline was extended, new harbors were developed, and the legendary port of Theodosius was paved over, forgotten beneath new neighborhoods. This transformation from bustling harbor to buried archaeology is what makes Yenikapi so uniquely important. It is an underwater museum that was never underwater, a site preserved not by the sea but by urban progress. The wet, oxygen-starved clay acted as a perfect seal, protecting the organic material from decay. For archaeologists, it is like opening a perfectly sealed drawer from the medieval world, offering an intact cross-section of daily economic life, trade networks, and naval technology. Each ship is a data point telling us about wood sourcing, construction techniques, and the lives of the sailors who manned them. The harbor of Theodosius challenges our idea of what a lost city looks like. It reminds us that sometimes the most profound historical discoveries are not at the bottom of the ocean, but right beneath our feet, hidden by the very layers of civilization that came after. The story of a city can sometimes be read through its coins. In the shallow, luminous waters of Elander Bay on Crete, the ancient city of Aulis offers a different kind of ledger, one written in submerged stone. This was no minor settlement, but a powerful and independent Dorian city-state that thrived for centuries, its influence echoing across the Aegean. Aulis commanded a strategic position on a narrow isthmus, controlling trade between mainland Crete and the peninsula of Spinalonga. Its wealth was tangible, minting its own distinctive silver coins, many stamped with the image of Artemis Britomartis, a revered local goddess of the mountains and hunting, who was also a protector of sailors. This blend of imagery tells us everything: a society whose prosperity sprang from both the land and the sea, confident enough to issue its own currency. Its political acumen is recorded in one of the most fascinating documents from the ancient Greek world, a treaty of alliance and friendship with the mighty city of Knossos. The text was inscribed for all to see on a stone wall in the city center, a public guarantee of peace and mutual cooperation. Today, that same wall lies just beneath the surface of the bay, its words now read by fish and snorkelers instead of citizens. The submergence of Aulis was not a sudden cataclysm but a gradual surrender to the restless earth. The entire region is crisscrossed with seismic faults, and archaeologists believe a series of local earthquakes caused the land beneath the city to subside incrementally over time. The ground simply sank, and the serene waters of the Mediterranean seeped in, claiming streets, foundations, and public squares. Unlike a harbor ravaged by a tsunami, this was a slower transformation, perhaps allowing generations to adapt even as their city slowly descended. Now, Aulis presents one of the world's most accessible windows into a lost past. In water so clear and shallow that sunlight dapples the ancient stones, modern visitors can float above the ghostly grid of its streets. They can trace the outlines of walls, see the bases of what were once homes and temples, and even spot the circular foundation of a Christian basilica, showing the city's life spanned eras. It is a haunting and intimate experience, a direct physical connection to a community that vanished not into myth, but into the very landscape. The silent, sunken map of Aulis is a gentle lesson in geological impermanence. It embodies how the beautiful, unstable geography of the Aegean has constantly rewritten human history, turning vibrant centers of commerce and diplomacy into serene underwater museums, reminding us that the ground we build upon is always in quiet negotiation with the forces deep below. Legends are not always stories, sometimes they are memories. For generations, fishermen along the Tamil Nadu coast spoke of the 7 pagodas of Mahabalipuram, a magnificent group of temples that once graced the shore. In their telling, 6 of these grand structures were swallowed by the sea in a single night, a divine consequence for the city's arrogance. Only one, the shore temple, was spared, left standing as a solitary sentinel against the waves. For centuries, this was considered a beautiful metaphor, a poetic explanation for the powerful and sometimes cruel sea. Then, in December of 2004, the ocean itself decided to show its hand. As the Indian Ocean tsunami gathered force, it performed a strange and terrifying act along this coast. The water dramatically receded, pulling back hundreds of meters. For a few brief, surreal minutes, the seabed lay exposed, and there, in the wet sand, locals and tourists witnessed the impossible, the outlines of ancient man-made structures, including a large, beautifully carved stone lion and rows of fallen walls. The legend was real. The tsunami's destructive power had, in a tragic twist, corroborated a 1,000-year-old oral history. Subsequent archaeological surveys, using sonar and diving expeditions, have mapped a complex of submerged ruins spread across several acres. These are not random stones, but the remains of elaborate temples and structures from the Pallava dynasty, which ruled the region between the 6th and 9th centuries. This was a major port and artistic capital, where stone was carved into breathtaking narratives of gods and goddesses. The fate of this harbor complex seems written by 2 forces working in concert. Gradual sea level rise over the centuries would have slowly encroached upon the coastline, weakening the foundations. Then, episodic catastrophic tsunamis, like the one remembered in legend and witnessed again in modern times, delivered the final, devastating blows. The story of Mahabalipuram's lost temples is a profound dialogue between culture and catastrophe. It shows how a natural disaster can instantly reshape a sacred landscape, and how the human mind, striving to make sense of such loss, weaves the event into story, preserving the truth of what happened in the form of myth. The sea took the temples, but it could not erase the memory of them, a memory that waited patiently in the stories of fishermen for the day the waves would roll back and reveal the proof. Herod the Great built a harbor not just for ships but for his own legacy. On a stretch of featureless coast in Judea, he envisioned a gateway to the Roman world, a port so grand it would bear the name of his imperial patron, Caesar Augustus. The result was Caesarea Maritima, and its beating heart was the harbor of Sebastos, an engineering marvel that defied the very nature of the Mediterranean. The coastline here offered no natural shelter, no protective bay or deep inlet, so Herod's engineers, likely with Roman technical advisors, decided to create one from nothing. They constructed 2 immense breakwaters that reached out into the open sea like stone arms, embracing an area of over 40 acres of calm water. The northern breakwater alone stretched for over 250 meters. But the true genius, the secret that made this impossible project feasible, was the concrete. The Romans had developed a special formula using volcanic ash from Italy, known as pozzolana. When mixed with lime and rubble, this created a hydraulic cement that could actually set and harden underwater. Barges would carry this mixture out to the breakwater site and pour it into huge wooden forms directly on the seabed. The concrete would cure into a monolithic, water-resistant stone, bonding with the existing seafloor to create a permanent, artificial coastline. Within this colossal enclosure stood a city designed for spectacle and control. A towering lighthouse rivaling the famed pharaohs of Alexandria guided ships safely to the entrance. Sprawling warehouses lined the quays, ready to store the grain, wine, and luxury goods flowing between Rome and its eastern provinces. This was more than a port, it was a statement in stone proclaiming Herod's power and loyalty to Rome, which soon made it the provincial capital. For about a century, Sebastos thrived as one of the busiest harbors in the Mediterranean. Yet its foundations held a fatal flaw. The breakwaters were built not on bedrock but on unstable sandbanks and sediments. The very concrete that gave them life was also immensely heavy. Over decades, this weight caused the structures to slowly sink and settle unevenly into the soft seabed. Then the earthquakes came. A series of tremors common in the region rattled the already stressed breakwaters. Sections cracked and slumped. Once the protective arms were breached, the relentless Mediterranean waves began their work, scouring away at the weakened stone. The final blow was silting, as currents deposited sand into the now imperfect basin, gradually choking the deep water access that had been its reason for being. By the early medieval period, the great harbour of Sebastos was a ruin, its sunken breakwaters becoming a hazardous reef. Today, the magnificent city of Caesarea remains above water, a major archaeological site. But if you swim or dive just offshore, you encounter a different monument, the ghostly, tumbled blocks of Herod's ambition, now home to corals and fish. This harbour offers a clear lesson in the dialogue between human innovation and geological reality. It shows that even the most advanced technology of its age could not ultimately overcome a poor foundation. In our modern era of massive coastal infrastructure, the silent stones of Sebastos ask us a quiet, persistent question: how well are we building for the forces of tomorrow? The luxury of an empire now lies beneath the bay. While Caesarea was a monument to political power, the Roman city of Baiae was a monument to pleasure itself, a lavish resort where the elite of the ancient world came to indulge. This was the playground of emperors, where figures like Caligula and Nero built sprawling villas directly over the water's edge, filled with exquisite mosaics, marble statues, and steaming thermal baths fed by natural hot springs. The harbour here was not for grain ships but for gilded pleasure barges, a gateway to hedonism on an imperial scale. Yet this entire scene of opulence was built upon a geological powder keg. Baiae sits within the Phlegraean Fields, a supervolcanic caldera whose name translates to the burning fields. This landscape is not inert, it breathes. The land here slowly rises and falls in a process known as bradyseism, driven by the movement of magma and superheated fluids far below the surface. Over centuries, a phase of subsidence caused a portion of the coastline, including the heart of Baiae's luxurious waterfront district, to sink beneath the waters of the Bay of Naples. It was not a sudden cataclysm, but a slow, inexorable descent, as if the earth itself was reclaiming the decadence built upon it. Today, this creates one of the world's most surreal archaeological experiences. The sunken city is now an underwater park, where divers can glide over the same mosaic floors where senators once walked, and see statues of nymphs and gods standing silently among seagrass, their faces watched by curious fish. A colonnaded street, once lined with shops and taverns, is now a reef. The thermal springs still bubble up from the seabed, warming the water around ancient stone vents. This preservation is uniquely poignant because it captures a society not in its formal, public grandeur, but in its private leisure. The fate of Baiae speaks to a different kind of vulnerability. It shows that a city can vanish not because of the sea's assault, but because the very ground it trusts can become fluid and unstable. In a region defined by volcanic fury, the most lasting legacy of Roman excess was not burned by fire, but gently, permanently claimed by the water. A different kind of ghost town haunts the cliffs of Suffolk. Dunwich was not a city of antiquity, but a powerhouse of medieval England, a bustling port that by the 13th century rivaled London itself. As the capital of the Kingdom of East Anglia, it was a center of trade, religion, and political power, with a harbor sheltering a fleet of fishing and merchant vessels. Its skyline was dominated by not one, but several grand churches and monasteries, including a magnificent priory, their spires a testament to the city's wealth and piety. Yet today, almost nothing of that great city remains on land. Its story is not one of subsidence or sudden submergence, but of a slow, deliberate consumption. Dunwich did not sink, it was eaten alive, bite by the relentless North Sea. The agent of this destruction was coastal erosion, a process as patient as it is powerful. The cliffs upon which Dunwich was built were composed of soft, unstable layers of sand, clay, and gravel. Fierce storms surging up from the North Atlantic would hammer the coastline with colossal waves. Each tempest would undercut the cliffs, causing great sections to calve away into the sea, taking with them everything built upon the edge. Over the centuries, this was a continuous, terrifying retreat. Records tell of entire streets, then churches, then entire parishes vanishing into the foam. The harbour, the very source of the city's wealth, was gradually scoured away, its protective features destroyed until ships could no longer safely anchor. By the 18th century, what was once a metropolis had been reduced to a tiny village, with the last of its major churches, St. Peter's, finally toppling over the cliff edge in the early 20th century. But Dunwich did not vanish without a trace. Modern technology has given us a haunting map of this lost world. Marine archaeologists using side-scan sonar have imaged the seabed just offshore, revealing the ghostly but unmistakable outlines of a medieval town. The scans show the crumbled remains of those great churches, St. Nicholas and St. Catherine, lying in the sand. They trace the faint grid of lost streets, like All Saints Street, where merchants once lived and traded. They have even identified the likely wreck of a medieval ship resting where the harbour once was. These sonar images are a poignant digital gravestone, confirming the historical records and giving form to the legend. The slow-motion tragedy of Dunwich is more than a historical curiosity. It is a sobering case study written in water and stone. It demonstrates with brutal clarity how a thriving community can be dismantled not by a single catastrophe, but by the cumulative force of countless storms, especially when built upon a vulnerable coastline. For modern communities facing the dual pressures of rising sea levels and increased storm intensity driven by climate change, Dunwich stands as a stark and silent warning from the past. It asks us how we choose to defend our own shores and what we are willing to lose in the endless negotiation between human settlement and the power of the sea. The debate between nature and human artistry reaches its peak in the turquoise waters off Japan's westernmost island. Here, a series of colossal, geometric formations rise from the seabed, a place known as the Yonaguni Monument. Discovered by a local dive guide in the 1980s, this site presents one of maritime archaeology's most tantalizing and contentious mysteries. Are we looking at a fantastically sculpted natural landscape or the sunken ruins of a harbour complex from a forgotten age? The structures are undeniably striking. Massive sandstone blocks form what appear to be wide, flat terraces and sharp 90-degree angles. There are features that look like staircases with uniform steps and a prominent platform that resembles a stage or altar. One formation, often called the turtle, looks like a stylized animal carving, while another face of the rock has prompted speculation about a carved human face. For many who see it, the arrangement feels too orderly, too architectural, to be purely random. This visual evidence has fueled a compelling theory that Yonaguni is a remnant of a lost civilization, perhaps even connected to the Pacific legend of a sunken continent called Mu. If human-made, this would have been a monumental undertaking, a terraced harbor or ceremonial center constructed over 10,000 years ago, before the rising seas at the end of the last ice age slowly claimed it. The submergence story would be one of gradual, inevitable change, as post-glacial sea level rise transformed a coastal site into an underwater one. The scientific consensus, however, leans strongly toward a natural explanation. Geologists point out that the sandstone in this region is crisscrossed with natural vertical and horizontal fractures. Over millennia, the powerful currents of the East China Sea have eroded along these lines, plucking away blocks and creating the clean, angular shapes we see. The apparent staircases could be the result of harder layers of rock eroding more slowly than softer ones, creating a stepped effect. The so-called carvings, they argue, are the products of selective erosion and the human brain's innate tendency to see familiar patterns, a phenomenon called pareidolia, where we find faces in clouds or shapes in rock. Yet, a few stubborn details keep the debate from being fully settled. Some researchers point to what appear to be small, regular marks on certain surfaces that could be interpreted as tool marks. They also note a curious lack of scattered debris around the base of the main monument, which one might expect from a purely natural collapse. These anomalies are not enough to convince mainstream science, but they are enough to sustain a profound question. The Yonaguni monument challenges us in a fundamental way. It forces us to examine the line between a spectacular work of natural geology and a potential artifact of human history. Whether shaped by patient currents or ancient hands, its silent presence on the seafloor is a powerful reminder that the ocean's depths hold puzzles that resist easy answers, inviting us to keep looking and to keep wondering what stories the stones might tell if only they could speak. The mystery of Yonaguni asks us to separate nature from human hand, but some sunken cities offer no such debate. On the rugged coast of ancient Lycia, now Turkey, the stones speak with perfect clarity. Apelli is a city that simply walked into the sea. Unlike the catastrophic ends of other ports, its story is one of quiet, inexorable surrender, leaving a hauntingly beautiful ruin that blurs the line between archaeology and the natural world. Here, the city walls do not end at the shoreline. They continue their march straight into the clear turquoise water, descending step by step into the deep. This is not a harbor lost to a single storm, but a landscape in slow, graceful motion, a testament to the patient power of the shifting earth. The city's entire existence was built on a single, precious commodity, a color. Apelli was a factory town for the ancient world's most coveted dye, Tyrian purple. This was not a pigment from plants, but from the sea itself, harvested from the spiny murex snail. The process was famously laborious and foul-smelling, requiring thousands of snails to produce a single gram of the vibrant, color-fast dye that became synonymous with imperial power and immense wealth. The rocky coastline around Apelli was perfect for cultivating these snails, and the city's economy thrived on this specialized, malodorous trade. Its modest harbor bustled with ships carrying small, incredibly valuable cargoes of dyed wool and cloth to the elites of Rome and Byzantium. This prosperity, however, was built on a sinking foundation. The entire Lycian coast is a dramatic landscape of tectonic activity, where the Anatolian plate is slowly being pushed and twisted. At Apelli, this resulted in a gradual process of subsidence. The land itself, over centuries, descended at a rate almost too slow for any single generation to fully perceive. As it sank, the Mediterranean waters advanced not with a violent surge, but with a gentle, persistent encroachment. First, the lowest warehouses and quays would have become flooded at high tide. Then, entire sections of the waterfront district became permanently submerged. The city did not fight this change, it adapted, retreating slowly uphill until the sea's advance finally outran them. What remains today is an open-air, or rather open-water, museum of this process. Snorkelers can float above a sunken grid of streets, following the lines of submerged walls that once defined city blocks. They can glide over the clear outlines of ancient quays where murex dye shipments were once loaded, and even peer into submerged rock-cut tombs, now silent chambers for schools of shimmering fish. The experience is profoundly intimate, a direct, tangible connection to the daily life of a community that lived and worked by the sea, only to have the sea gradually become their streets. Apelli represents a different kind of loss, one without fire or wave, but with the silent, inevitable drop of the land. It offers a perfectly preserved snapshot of relative sea level change, where human structures were not shattered, but were seamlessly integrated into a new, aquatic environment. This gentle drowning asks us to consider time on a scale larger than human history, reminding us that the ground we consider solid is part of a slow, continental dance, and sometimes the sea is merely waiting for the next step. Silk and pearls once flowed through a gateway to the east. On the arid coastline of the Persian Gulf, where the mountains of Iran meet the sea, the port of Suraf transformed a barren shore into one of the medieval world's great crossroads. For over 3 centuries, from the 9th to the 12th, this was the bustling heart of the Indian Ocean trade network, a place where the maritime Silk Road came alive. Its docks were a symphony of languages and cultures, where Arab and Persian merchants unloaded fragrant spices from India, delicate Celadon porcelain from China, and exotic woods and ivory from the coasts of East Africa. The city's legendary wealth was built on luxury, most famously on the lustrous pearls harvested from the Gulf's own warm waters. This was not just a commercial hub, it was a sophisticated city of grand mosques, sprawling villas with intricate stucco decorations, and public baths, all financed by the endless flow of goods between continents. Suraf's prosperity seemed as permanent as the mountains behind it, yet its foundations were far more fragile. The first major blow was a violent shudder from the earth itself. In the year 977, a powerful earthquake struck the region, causing widespread damage to the city's infrastructure and its vital harbor works. While the community rebuilt, the catastrophe left a lasting scar on both the landscape and Suraf's reputation as a secure haven. Political instability followed, with the port suffering a destructive sack in the 11th century that further disrupted its commercial life. But perhaps the most decisive factor was not a sudden disaster, but a slow, irreversible change in the currents of global commerce. As ship design improved and political power shifted, trade routes began to favor other ports further west, like the rising island fortress of Harbours. Merchants and their capital migrated to these new hubs, and the lifeblood of Suraf gradually drained away. The final abandonment was a quiet affair, a collective decision to leave a place whose time had passed. Today, the ruins of Suraf stand silent on the coast, a sprawling archaeological site of crumbling walls and foundations. While the city center remains on land, the story of its harbor continues beneath the waves. Local tectonic subsidence and centuries of siltation from seasonal rivers have caused the shoreline to advance, leaving what were once quay wharves and breakwaters now submerged in the shallow Gulf waters. This partial drowning makes Suraf a different kind of lesson. Its end was not a single cataclysm, but a chain of events where a natural disaster weakened a city just as the man-made maps of trade were being redrawn. A harbor can die not because its walls fall down, but because the world simply decides to sail elsewhere. The concept of a harbor can be far larger than stone quays and man-made breakwaters. Sometimes the most important harbor of all is an entire landscape, a continent waiting to be explored. Stretching across what is now the turbulent North Sea, there once existed a vast, fertile lowland known to researchers as Doggerland. This was not a city, but a country-sized bridge connecting the British Peninsula to mainland Europe, a verdant world of rolling hills, forests, rivers, and marshes teeming with life. For thousands of years following the retreat of the great ice sheets, bands of Mesolithic hunter-gatherers made this land their home. They followed herds of deer and aurochs, fished in its abundant rivers, and gathered nuts and berries in its dense woodlands. Their routes of travel along river valleys and sheltered coastlines formed the original network of this world, natural harbors for human movement, communication, and the exchange of ideas and resources across a connected continent. This entire world and the countless stories of the people who lived there is now gone, lying beneath 100 meters of cold, dark water. Its disappearance was a two-part finale written by the changing climate. First, the steady, global rise in sea levels from melting glaciers slowly shrank the landmass over centuries, compressing the living space and pushing communities toward higher ground. Then, around 6,150 years before the Common Era, a final, apocalyptic event sealed its fate. Off the coast of Norway, a colossal section of the continental shelf known as the Storegga Slide gave way, triggering a devastating tsunami that surged across the remaining lowlands. This wave would have been unimaginable, a wall of water sweeping across the flat terrain, scouring away the final refuges of both humans and animals. The combination of the gradual encroachment and this single catastrophic blow rendered Doggerland uninhabitable, completing its transformation from a heartland to a seabed. The loss of Doggerland reframes our understanding of what it means to lose a harbor. It was not a port that vanished, but an entire geographical and human context, a complete chapter of early European prehistory. Its inundation did more than flood a territory. It reset the map of human civilization, permanently severing the land bridge and forcing the peoples of Britain and Europe onto separate evolutionary paths. The discovery of its existence through trawler nets bringing up ancient animal bones and primitive tools from the seafloor is a profound reminder. It tells us that the history of human connection is often written on landscapes that no longer exist, and that the sea's greatest secret may not be cities of stone, but the lost worlds that once made us who we are. The desert can bury a harbor as completely as the sea. In the golden sands of North Africa, the Roman city of Leptis Magna stood as a testament to imperial ambition, its wealth flowing from the vast olive groves that carpeted the hinterland. To secure that wealth and project Roman power across the Mediterranean, the city's most famous son, Emperor Septimius Severus, embarked on a monumental project in the early 3rd century. He ordered the construction of a harbor worthy of his birthplace, a massive artificial port that would defy the limitations of the natural coastline. The design was a masterpiece of Roman engineering, a grand rectangular basin carved directly into the shore, protected by two formidable stone breakwaters. At the end of one arm stood a towering lighthouse, its beacon guiding the empire's grain ships safely into the embrace of the city. Within the sheltered waters, a forest of stone wharves and immense multi-story warehouses or horia rose from the water's edge. These buildings were the economic engine of the city, where mountains of olive oil, destined for the baths and kitchens of Rome, were stored in countless ceramic amphorae before their journey across the sea. For a time, this harbor made Leptis Magna one of the most vital ports in the entire Mediterranean, a glittering node in the network that fed an empire. Yet, from its very inception, the harbor carried the seeds of its own destruction. Its greatest enemy was not a foreign fleet, but the gentle, seasonal river that flowed nearby, the Wadi Lebda. This watercourse carried fine, fertile silt from the inland plains, depositing it steadily into the harbor basin. The Romans understood the threat and fought a constant, expensive battle against it, employing teams of laborers and likely sophisticated dredging equipment to keep the channels clear for deep draft vessels. It was a war against geography itself, a testament to Roman willpower over the patient, accumulating power of the land. This struggle could only be sustained by the immense resources and administrative focus of a unified empire. When that empire fractured, and particularly after the Arab conquest of the region in the 7th century, the delicate balance was broken, maintenance ceased. The political and economic gravity of the Mediterranean world shifted eastward, and the great trade routes that had once made Leptis Magna essential began to bypass it. The city was gradually abandoned, its grand avenues and theaters left to the silence of the desert. Without human intervention, the Wadi Lebda finally won its long war. Over centuries, wind-blown sand joined the river's silt, silently and completely entombing the magnificent harbor. What the sea took in other locations, the desert claimed here, burying the stone breakwaters, the lighthouse foundation, and the vast warehouses under meters of arid earth. This created a different kind of preservation, an arid time capsule where the dry sand protected organic materials and structures from decay. Modern archaeologists brushing away the desert did not find a sunken ruin, but a harbor complex frozen in a state of suspended animation, as if the last Roman dockworker had simply walked away and the landscape slowly filled in the space. The story of Leptis Magna's harbor completes a profound cycle in our exploration. We have seen ports claimed by water, by earth, and by the slow redrawing of trade maps. Here we witness a harbor vanquished by the very fertility of the land it served, buried not beneath the waves, but beneath the dust of its own prosperity. It reminds us that a harbor's end is not always a dramatic plunge, but can be a quiet, patient suffocation, a slow forgetting written in layers of sand. The stones of a forgotten kingdom are rising from the Bay of Navarino. For decades, the story of Bronze Age Pylos was told from its hilltop palace, the legendary home of King Nestor from Homer's epics. This was the seat of a powerful Mycenaean kingdom, its walls lined with clay tablets detailing a complex economy. But a kingdom needs a gateway to the wider world, and archaeologists long wondered where that gateway might be. Recent underwater surveys just offshore have provided a stunning answer. Scattered across the seabed, they have found the colossal foundations of a major harbor complex, a submerged counterpart to the palace on the hill. This is not a collection of random blocks, but clear evidence of deliberate, massive construction. There are the remains of what appears to be a fortified mole, a stone breakwater protecting the inner anchorage. Even more tantalizing is the discovery of a long, narrow stone structure that researchers believe may be a ship shed, a covered dock designed to protect the kingdom's vital warships or trade vessels from the elements and from potential enemies. This harbor was the economic engine of the palace, the point where goods like olive oil, perfumed ointments, and fine pottery were loaded onto ships bound for other Mycenaean centers for Crete and across the Aegean. Its design speaks of both prosperity and paranoia, built for trade but also for defense in a competitive and volatile age. The submergence of this strategic port follows a familiar pattern in this seismically active part of the world. The same tectonic forces that built the Greek peninsula are constantly reshaping its coastline. In the Bay of Navarino, the land has slowly subsided over the millennia, a gradual sinking that allowed the sea to claim the Bronze Age waterfront. This process was likely accelerated by occasional earthquakes, which may have caused sections of the harbor to drop more suddenly. The water that now covers these stones is not deep, which makes the discovery so evocative, a ghostly outline of maritime power lying just out of reach beneath the surface. Finding this harbor does more than mark a spot on an ancient map. It changes how we understand the Mycenaeans themselves. These were not just warlords in hilltop fortresses. They were savvy maritime operators whose wealth and influence depended on controlling the sea lanes. The harbor of Pylos gives tangible, physical form to the world Homer described, a world of well-organized kingdoms with professional navies and far-reaching trade networks. Its silent presence on the seafloor adds a crucial, missing piece to the puzzle of this advanced civilization, a civilization that, along with its peers, experienced a sudden and catastrophic collapse around the year 1200 before the Common Era. The reasons for that wider collapse remain one of history's great mysteries, involving a complex mix of invasion, internal strife, climate shifts, and the breakdown of international trade. The submerged harbor of Pylos now stands as a monument to that lost connectivity. It is a silent witness to the final days when the ships may have stopped coming, when the network that sustained the palace slowly unraveled, leaving the great stone docks to be claimed by the patient, rising sea. Sand and sea could build a kingdom as quickly as they could destroy one. In the turbulent waters where the river Humber meets the North Sea, a spit of land emerged from the waves in the early 13th century, a gift from the shifting currents. Opportunistic settlers saw not a temporary sandbank but a golden chance. By the 1230s, they had founded a new port right on this precarious foundation, naming it Ravenseur-Ard. Its rise was as swift as it was audacious, with a prime location controlling access to the wealthy ports upstream like Hull. It rapidly grew into a bustling harbour town, granted a royal charter to hold markets and fairs. But its prosperity was forged in a shadowy reputation. Ravenseur-Ard became infamous as a pirate town, a haven for ships that would deliberately lure merchant vessels onto the treacherous sandbanks only to plunder their stranded cargo. This was a port built on the edge of the law, as volatile as the ground beneath its streets. For over a century, this risky enterprise thrived, a testament to human audacity. Yet the very forces that had created the sandbank were always waiting to reclaim it. The North Sea is relentless, and the powerful estuarine currents that had deposited the sand began to chew it away. By the mid-1400s, the town's fragile existence was unraveling. Major storms, one after another, scoured the coastline. Chronicles from the time paint a haunting picture of the town's final years, describing residents standing helpless as their neighbors' houses were consumed by the advancing waves, the sea literally eating the town from its edges inward. There was no defense possible against such a force on such unstable ground. The community's pleas for aid went unanswered, their fate sealed by geography. By the year 1360, scarcely a century after its founding, Ravenseur-Ard was gone completely, not a single structure left above the water. This harbour's story is a stark counterpart to the slow erosion of Dunwich. Where Dunwich endured a centuries-long retreat, Ravenseur-Ard illustrates how quickly a coastal settlement can vanish when built upon the most transient of landscapes. Its entire life cycle, from opportunistic birth to notorious prosperity to total erasure, happened within the span of a few human generations. It left behind no grand ruins, only a name on old maps and a warning in the historical record. The legacy of Ravenseur-Ard is one of profound impermanence. It shows that some harbours are not just vulnerable to the sea, but are literal expressions of it, temporary arrangements of sand and human ambition that the ocean can revoke as casually as it once granted them. The final harbour is a place of quiet drowning. Apollonia, the graceful port for the great inland city of Cyrene, rests now in two worlds. On the Libyan coast, its sun-bleached columns and theatre stand proudly on land, while just offshore, those same elegant stone forms descend in orderly rows into the clear Mediterranean shallows. This is not a scene of violent ruin, but of serene integration, where the sea has become an extension of the city's own architecture. For centuries, Apollonia served as the vital maritime gateway for Cyrene, one of the most important Greek colonies in North Africa, funneling the region's legendary harvests of silphium, a plant prized as medicine and spice, out to the wider Mediterranean world. Its decline was written not in storm surges or silt, but in the deep, patient rhythm of the planet itself. The entire Cyrenaican platform, the geological shelf upon which the city was built, has been gradually subsiding due to tectonic forces. This was a sinking measured in millimeters per year, a shift almost imperceptible across a single human lifetime. Unlike a tsunami or earthquake that delivers a single, fatal blow, this slow-motion submergence presented the people of Apollonia with a different kind of challenge, one of relentless, creeping adaptation. As the waters advanced inch by inch over generations, the community did not simply abandon their city. Instead, they responded with pragmatic resilience. They rebuilt and reinforced the seaward defenses. They adapted structures, perhaps raising floors or repurposing lower levels as the water table rose. Eventually, they retreated incrementally uphill, constructing new quarters on higher ground, while the oldest waterfront districts were gradually relinquished to the sea. This process of continuous adjustment over centuries has created a remarkable archaeological palimpsest, a site with layers of history stacked both vertically and horizontally. On land, you see the later Roman and Byzantine phases of the city. Walk into the gentle surf, however, and you navigate the older Greek foundations, the original harbor walls, and the paved streets of the earliest settlement, all now home to seagrass and darting fish. Apollonia's story concludes our journey with a profound, almost philosophical perspective on loss. It embodies the slow, inexorable force of tectonic movement, a geological certainty that operates on a timescale far beyond human planning. There was no villainous storm or moment of catastrophic failure here, only the graceful, inevitable surrender of a landscape to the sea. This slow drowning created something unique, not a grave, but a seamless merging of human history with the natural world. The submerged stones of Apollonia ask us to consider time itself as the ultimate force shaping our coasts, a reminder that the ground beneath our feet is in constant, quiet motion, and that the most enduring human legacy may sometimes be the gentle art of learning how to let go. Across these 20 vanished worlds, a single pattern emerges from the depths. The agents of their destruction, while unique in each story, resolve into 3 overwhelming forces, each a reminder of our fragile place within a dynamic planet. The first is the restless Earth itself, through tectonic subsidence and seismic violence, a power that can drop a coastline meters in minutes or sink it gently over centuries. The second is the global climate, in the immense, patient rise of post-glacial seas that redrew the world's map, drowning landscapes like Doggerland and encroaching on shores from India to Israel. The third force is perhaps the most revealing, human-induced siltation, where the very success of a harbor, the farming, building, and living around it, fills its lifeblood channels with the earth it sought to master. These are not ancient problems, they are ongoing dialogues between human settlement and planetary systems. Beyond their ends, these harbors collectively sketch a stunning portrait of ancient globalization. Long before container ships and air travel, the Mediterranean, the Indian Ocean, and the North Sea were highways. A bronze statue cast in Greece could be lost in an Egyptian harbor, Chinese porcelain could grace a table in Persia, and dyes from a Lycian factory could color the robes of Roman emperors. These sunken ports were the vital nodes in that network, proving that our impulse to connect, trade, and exchange ideas is a foundational thread of human history. Their silent ruins are the physical evidence of a world that was deeply, intricately linked. This legacy forces a pressing question upon our modern moment. Our planet's coastlines are now home to colossal megacities, financial hubs, and billions of people. We have built upon deltas, reclaimed land from the sea, and armored shores with concrete. Yet are we, in our ambition, constructing the next generation of future sunken harbors? The equation has changed, but the variables remain hauntingly familiar. Today, human-driven climate change acts as a terrifying accelerant, amplifying every threat these ancient ports faced. Sea level rise is no longer a slow geological process, but a measurable, rapid consequence. The intensity and frequency of coastal storms are increasing, echoing the great surges that erased Rungholt and Dunwich. The ground beneath cities like Jakarta and Bangkok is subsiding faster than ever due to groundwater extraction, mirroring the fate of Thonis-Heracleion. We now possess the knowledge to see these patterns, to read the warnings written in submerged stone. The cycle of creation and submersion is not a closed chapter of history, it is an ongoing story, and we are now its authors. The ultimate lesson from these silent harbors is not one of despair, but of perspective. They ask us to look at our own waterfronts with new eyes, to consider the legacy we are building upon the shifting sands of time, and to choose what we wish to preserve for the millennia to come. The seabed holds a library of human endeavor, written not in books but in stone and silt. Our voyage across these 20 lost harbors paints a clear, humbling portrait. No empire, no matter how wealthy, and no engineering, no matter how brilliant, could ever declare a permanent victory over the restless earth and the patient sea. These cities teach us that coastal prosperity is not a static achievement, but a continuous, delicate negotiation. Their stories of subsidence, of rising waters, and of shifting sands are not relics of a distant past. They are chapters in an ongoing planetary story where we are now writing the next lines. Each discovery from the deep, from a Minoan trade weight to a Roman ship's timber, does more than fill a museum case. It reconnects a severed thread in the tapestry of our shared history. It shows us a world that was interconnected long before modern maps, a testament to the timeless human drive to explore, to trade, and to build communities where the land meets the water. As we look to our own crowded coastlines and a future of climatic change, these silent ruins offer a dual legacy. They are a sobering reminder of vulnerability, a warning etched in drowned masonry about building on foundations we cannot fully control. Yet they are equally a profound inspiration, evidence of incredible resilience, innovation, and the enduring human spirit that seeks connection against all odds. The past may be submerged, but its lessons have never been more vital to hear. If this journey into the world's sunken gateways resonated with you, consider subscribing for more explorations where history and mystery meet. And we would love to know which of these vanished harbors left the deepest impression on you. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's keep the conversation flowing. The stories of our world are never truly lost. They are simply waiting for the right moment to surface.